What does it really mean to be disciplined? For many of us, discipline sounds like restriction, saying no to pleasures, working harder, grinding through things we don't want to do. But in truth, self-discipline is not punishment. It is freedom. Freedom from being controlled by impulses, by emotions, by fears. And there is perhaps no better example of this than Marcus Aurelius, the emperor of Rome, the most powerful man in the world during his time, who spent his nights writing to himself about humility, about anger, about self-control, about being a better human being. Marcus Aurelius is remembered not only as a ruler, but as a philosopher king. His private writings, known today as meditations, were never meant to be read by anyone else. They were reminders to himself on how to live with discipline, clarity, and purpose. And yet, centuries later, those lessons remain some of the most powerful teachings on how to master ourselves. In this story, we'll explore Marcus's life, his struggles, his victories, and the wisdom he left behind, and how we can use it today, in our own lives, to build self-discipline and live with more purpose. Marcus Aurelius was not born into the role of emperor. He was born in 121 CE in Rome, into a family of noble but not ruling background. From a young age, he was described as quiet, thoughtful, and unusually serious for a child. He had tutors in rhetoric, philosophy, and Greek literature, but even then, he was drawn more toward the Stoics, philosophers who taught that the only true good was virtue, and the only true evil was vice. Everything else, wealth, status, pleasure, pain, was indifferent. One of his earliest nicknames was Verissimus, the most truthful, given to him by Emperor Hadrian himself, who saw in the boy a kind of honesty and sincerity that set him apart. The lesson here is simple. Discipline often begins with humility. Before Marcus became emperor, he was a student. He was willing to learn. He surrounded himself with teachers who challenged him to be better. For us, the same is true. Self-discipline begins not with power or control, but with the willingness to learn, to admit ignorance, to let ourselves be shaped. Marcus's path changed dramatically when Emperor Hadrian chose his adoptive son Antoninus Pius to rule after him, but with a condition. Antoninus had to adopt Marcus as his heir. Suddenly, Marcus was destined for power, but instead of drowning in luxury, he doubled down on philosophy. He studied under Stoic teachers like Junius Rusticus, who gave him Epictetus's discourses. Epictetus, a former slave turned philosopher, taught that while we cannot control what happens around us, we can always control how we respond. Marcus absorbed this deeply. In Meditations, he would later write, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Imagine being in a palace, surrounded by temptations, wealth, and distractions, and yet choosing instead to practice restraint, to listen to philosophers rather than flatterers. The lesson for us: discipline means choosing carefully what you feed your mind. You are always training yourself with the books you read, the voices you listen to, the habits you repeat. When Antoninus Pius died in 161 CE, Marcus Aurelius became emperor. He did not want the position. In fact, he would have preferred to live quietly as a philosopher. But duty came before comfort. As emperor, Marcus shared power with Lucius Verus, a co-ruler. He married Faustina, with whom he would have many children, though tragically most did not survive to adulthood. His reign would be defined by constant struggle, wars in the east, invasions on the northern frontier, and the Antonine plague that killed millions. Yet in all of this, Marcus never abandoned his philosophy. He ruled with restraint, preferring justice and fairness over cruelty or self-interest. He lived simply, wore plain clothes, and kept his diet modest. For Marcus, self-discipline meant choosing duty over pleasure, responsibility over comfort. And this is a lesson for us. The disciplined life is not about what is easiest, but about what is right. It is about doing what must be done, even when we would rather not. Perhaps the greatest test of Marcus Aurelius's discipline came not in Rome, but on the battlefield. For much of his reign, he was away from the capital, leading armies along the Danube frontier against Germanic tribes. The conditions were brutal: harsh winters, disease, constant danger. Yet Marcus endured. Even in the midst of war, he wrote his meditations, often in a soldier's tent, reminding himself to stay calm, to stay just, to stay disciplined. He reminded himself that death was natural, that pain was bearable, and that anger was weakness. He wrote, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. And this you have the power to revoke at any moment. Imagine the most powerful man in the world, sitting by candlelight in a freezing camp, writing not about conquest, but about patience, humility, and endurance." The lesson here is powerful. Discipline is not about avoiding hardship, but about enduring it with dignity. During Marcus's reign, the Antonine plague swept through the empire, killing millions. It brought economic collapse, fear, and social unrest. Many emperors before him had responded to crisis with scapegoating or cruelty. Marcus responded with calm. He organized aid, supported communities, and wrote to himself about the importance of perspective. You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think in times of chaos. Marcus's discipline was not only physical, but emotional. He didn't allow panic to rule him. He focused on what could be done and accepted what could not. For us, this is a lesson in resilience. When life feels chaotic, discipline means focusing on what is within our control, not wasting energy on what is not. One of the most fascinating aspects of Marcus's life is his habit of journaling. The meditations were his personal notebook, never intended for others. They were his way of holding himself accountable, of practicing discipline in thought. Every day, he reminded himself to wake early, to be kind to others, to control anger, to accept hardship. He trained his mind daily, the way an athlete trains the body. He also lived with simplicity. Despite being emperor, he avoided excess, wore simple clothing, and ate modest meals. The lesson: discipline is not built in dramatic moments, but in daily habits. Journaling, reflection, routines. These are the small steps that create strength over time. Marcus struggled with anger. He was surrounded by corruption, betrayal, and incompetence. Yet he constantly reminded himself, anger hurts the one who holds it more than the one who receives it. He wrote, "When you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly. They are like this because they cannot tell good from evil, but I will not be harmed by them." For Marcus, discipline meant not letting emotions rule him. He accepted that others would be difficult, but he could choose his response. And for us, this lesson is crucial. Self-discipline means mastering reactions. We cannot control how others act, but we can always control how we respond. Rome was full of luxury, feasts, gold, entertainment. But Marcus Aurelius chose simplicity. He wrote often about the emptiness of chasing pleasure, reminding himself that desire is endless if you don't learn to say no. He wrote, "Very little is needed to make a happy life. It is all within yourself, in your way of thinking." He avoided extravagance not because he couldn't afford it, but because he knew it weakened discipline. This is our lesson. Discipline means freedom from desire. The more you need, the less control you have. Simplicity is power. One of the most repeated themes in Marcus's writings is death. He reminded himself daily that life is short and that death comes for everyone, emperors and peasants alike. But instead of this being depressing, it was liberating. By remembering death, he was freed to live with purpose. He wrote, "Do not act as if you were going to live 10,000 years. Death hangs over you. While you live, while it is in your power, be good." For Marcus, discipline was perspective, knowing that anger, fear, and greed are meaningless in the face of mortality. For us, remembering our mortality can sharpen our focus. It reminds us to live intentionally, to waste less time, to treat each day as valuable. So what can we learn from Marcus Aurelius about self-discipline? Create habits of reflection. Keep a journal. Write daily reminders to yourself, just as Marcus did. Master emotions. Expect challenges, but choose calm responses. Anger is weakness. Control is strength. Choose duty over comfort. Do what must be done, not what is easy. Live simply. Needing less makes you freer and stronger. Keep perspective. Remember death, and let it remind you of what really matters. Marcus Aurelius lived 2,000 years ago, but his lessons are timeless. He was not perfect, not unshakable, but he practiced self-discipline every day. And that is why his words still inspire. Marcus Aurelius was the most powerful man of his time. He commanded armies, ruled an empire, and carried the weight of millions of lives on his shoulders. Yet his true greatness was not in conquest or wealth, but in the quiet discipline with which he lived. Self-discipline is not chains. It is not punishment. It is the path to freedom. Freedom from fear, from desire, from anger, from distraction. It is the way to live with purpose. And as Marcus himself wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one, this has been history for nap time." Thank you for listening.